You ever witness something so petty it burns into your memory forever? Like you're just standing there watching this little moment happen in public thinking, that didn't just happen, right? That's exactly what it felt like the day everything changed at Gate B23 at LAX. It started off like any other Monday morning at the airport, chaotic but weirdly predictable. Families hauling around overstuffed luggage. Solo business travelers on their fourth espresso shot, phones glued to their ears. Flight attendants walking in like mini celebrities, heads high, heels higher, rolling their designer luggage like royalty strolling through peasants. But no one noticed the janitor. She wore navy blue coveralls, the kind with the name patch sewn over the heart. Hers read Mel. Not Melanie, just Mel. She moved through the crowd like background music, essential but ignored. You could tell she'd been up since before dawn. The mop in her hand looked heavier than it should have, and her boots creaked every few steps. And then came Vanessa. Even if you didn't know her name, you'd know her type. The lead flight attendant on Pacific Sky's 417 to New York. Blonde, blow-dried within an inch of its life, lips painted in a red so sharp it could slice a man's ego. She had that strut, the one that said I own this terminal. She rolled in wearing mirrored aviators and chewing gum like it had personally wronged her. Now here's where it starts. Vanessa rounds the corner with her trolley and nearly bumps into Mel, who's on her knees, cleaning up a spilled soda near the gate door. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even a full collision. But Vanessa recoiled like she'd just been sneezed on by a stray dog. Ugh. Can you not? She snapped, wrinkling her nose as she adjusted her silk scarf. Mel looked up, a bit stunned, and said nothing. Just stared. And honestly, it was that silence that made Vanessa go in harder. I swear, every time I come through this gate there's someone like you on the floor like a cockroach. Do you even see people walking? Or is mopping up your entire skill set? A few passengers looked up. A few even chuckled awkwardly. But Mel didn't say a word. She just slowly got up, picked up her bucket, and started walking away like Vanessa hadn't even spoken. And that only made Vanessa smirk harder. Typical, she mumbled under her breath, loud enough for everyone to hear. No backbone. Just like the rest of them. What Vanessa didn't know, what none of us knew, is that Mel wasn't your ordinary janitor. In fact, she wasn't really a janitor at all. Let me tell you something about people like Mel, they don't talk much but when they do, every word counts. And while Vanessa and her co-attendants were already boarding the aircraft, Mel was back in the janitor's storage closet behind Gate B23, sitting on an overturned mop bucket, her hand wrapped around a plain black coffee from the vending machine. She wasn't sulking. She wasn't plotting. She was watching. The closet was more like a hidden alcove than anything else. No cameras. No windows. Just her, a flickering light, a rack of mops, and a beat-up metal locker she never let anyone else near. Inside that locker? Not cleaning supplies. There was a laptop, old, rugged, military grade. There was a hard case with 2 key locks, one of which had a fingerprint reader. There was a manila folder labeled in thick, red ink, PS 417. And inside that folder? A full background report on Vanessa Jordan, age 34, currently employed by Pacific Skies Airlines for 6 years, previously suspended twice for passenger conduct incidents. There was also a note clipped to the front, handwritten. Possible connection to Antonov Shell Corp surveillance required. Approach with caution. Mel sipped her coffee, flipped the page, and stared at the next document. Her fingers tapped twice on the side of the laptop. The screen lit up with a biometric scan prompt. She leaned forward and it read her face, unlocking like something out of a spy thriller. The screen displayed a live feed, Gate B23's camera angles, aircraft loading zones, and something new, a heat map of people on the concourse. Mel zoomed in. Vanessa's red-hot dot glowed like a flame. So yeah, janitor? Maybe in uniform. But Mel hadn't been a real janitor in years. She used to be Special Field Agent Melanie Cross, former cyber surveillance and undercover ops for a covert branch of Homeland Intelligence. The kind of unit the government doesn't admit exists. But after something went wrong on her last mission in Ukraine, something involving a blown identity and a mole, she disappeared. Officially declared on leave. In reality, she'd gone dark, hiding in plain sight under a job no one ever looked at twice. Until now. Because Vanessa Jordan wasn't just a stuck-up flight attendant. Mel had seen her picture before, years ago, in a grainy photo pulled from a USB drive found in a vault in Kiev. Vanessa's face had been barely recognizable then, but it was her. Different hair. Different lips. Same eyes. Same expression. Cold. Ruthless. Entitled. Mel leaned back, letting the realization settle like a cold fog in her chest. It wasn't just a hunch anymore. Vanessa wasn't just mean, she was dangerous. And Flight 417 to New York? It wasn't just another commercial flight. It was the flight. On board that plane was someone who couldn't be allowed to land. Passenger 3B, Julian Varma. Tech billionaire. Allegedly clean. But Mel knew better. He wasn't just a CEO. He was the creator of an AI surveillance tool that had been illegally sold to rogue governments. The kind of tool that could wipe out digital identities, reassign criminal records, and manipulate traffic cams and airport systems in real time. And someone wanted him silenced before he reached Manhattan. Vanessa, Mel suspected, was the trigger. Now here's the twist. Mel wasn't on any official assignment. No one had authorized her to act. She was rogue. Which meant if she intervened, she'd be risking exposure. If she failed, no one would come for her. She'd vanish in the system like a smudge wiped clean. But she'd already made her decision. She stood up, peeled off her gloves, and opened the hard case in the locker. Inside, nestled in black foam, was a modified keycard, cloaked in Janitor's plastic, but underneath? It held the credentials to override most aircraft maintenance locks. Stolen? Technically. Reassigned? More like, repurposed. She shut the locker with a hard clang, walked out of the closet, and disappeared into the flow of passengers heading toward the gate. No one paid her any mind. Just a janitor finishing her shift. Except this janitor was about to board a plane she wasn't assigned to clean, and she was bringing baggage no X-ray could detect. Meanwhile, inside the aircraft, Vanessa was in full command. You know how some people put on a show in public but crack when no one's looking? Not her. Vanessa ran that cabin like it was her personal kingdom. And the crew? They fell in line. Some out of loyalty. Others out of fear. She was the kind of person who kept tabs on everyone. Crew rosters, passenger lists, flight logs. She noticed everything. So when Mel walked on board under the guise of fixing a faulty rear lavatory light, Vanessa narrowed her eyes. You, she said, that same venom dripping from her voice. You again? What's the matter? Toilets too complicated to fix from the floor? Mel didn't react. Didn't even blink. She walked straight down the aisle to the back, past the lavatory, and pretended to fumble with a panel. But her ears were listening. Her eyes were scanning. One by one, passengers filtered in, and then 3B. Julian Varma. Gray suit. Designer bag. Sunglasses indoors. Arrogance practically radiating from his pores. He sat down oblivious. Mel ran her fingers along the panel, pretending to check wiring, but her mind was racing. She had minutes to figure it out. Vanessa had either been instructed to poison Julian, detonate a device, or trigger a delay that would reroute him to a jurisdiction with no extradition laws. The how didn't matter. What mattered was stopping it before the doors closed and 36,000 feet of altitude separated her from backup. And then she saw it. A subtle flick of Vanessa's wrist. Reaching into her cart. Not for a beverage, but for a napkin packet. One of the courtesy refreshers she handed out right before takeoff. Mel had seen that brand before. Not at the grocery store. In evidence photos. They were custom ordered. Laced with a synthetic neurotoxin that mimicked cardiac arrest. In small doses it looked like a panic attack. Just enough to create chaos on a plane. Enough to cause one man to be taken off for medical emergencies. Except if Julian Varma didn't survive the ambulance ride, no one would question it. Mel turned. Walked briskly to the front. And this time she did speak. I need to see the manifest, she said flatly to the co-pilot at the galley. Excuse me, he blinked. Your maintenance? Mel pulled out a small badge from under her suit. It didn't say janitor. Division of Homeland Oversight, she said calmly. This flight's been compromised. I suggest you shut the cabin door and delay departure by 10 minutes. Or we may have more than a lavatory to clean up. His face paled. Behind them, Vanessa's voice rang out, far too casual. Is there a problem, Agent? Mel turned slowly and met her eyes. The same eyes from that grainy Ukraine photo. The same smirk. No, Mel said. Not yet. You know that feeling when the cabin doors seal shut and you realize there's no turning back? That pressurized click when the outside world becomes irrelevant and everything that matters is trapped inside a metal tube flying 6 miles above the ground? That's exactly what Mel felt the moment the aircraft pushed back from Gate B-23. The delay she requested didn't happen. Vanessa had smiled her way past the co-pilot's hesitation, whispering something in his ear with just enough sugar to melt his resolve. Mel didn't miss it. The crew might not have known who Vanessa really was, but they trusted her. She was the star of the skies. The gate agents adored her. The captain joked with her like they were old friends. No one was going to stop the flight because of one quietly insistent woman in coveralls, Homeland badge or not. Mel knew she had just one chance left. And it was now or never. As the plane began taxiing toward the runway, she made her way down the narrow aisle with her fake maintenance tablet in hand, trying not to look like her pulse was hammering against her ribs. Passengers were buckling in, sliding bags under seats, adjusting neck pillows. And right there, in seat 3B, Julian Varma tapped away on his phone, oblivious to the fact that he was a dead man on a countdown. And Vanessa? She was already in the galley, prepping the first round of drink service. She held the silver cart like a weapon, her face calm, professional, smiling to passengers, but her eyes occasionally flicked toward seat 3B. She was timing it. Mel ducked into the rear galley, flipped open the panel she had inspected earlier, and pulled out a narrow strip of circuitry she had planted herself months ago, a covert listening device, patched directly into the plane's internal comms. She jammed the tiny wire into her tablet and activated it. The tablet wasn't for maintenance diagnostics. It was surveillance. She could hear cockpit chatter, crew intercoms, and a private channel between Vanessa and someone using a heavily distorted voice. Proceed with package. Do not delay. Understood, Vanessa replied softly. Passenger 3B will not reach New York. There it was. Confirmed. Mel felt the blood drain from her face. She slid the tablet back into her tool belt and turned, but the curtain snapped open. Vanessa was standing there. That fake, polished smile stretched across her face. Her hand gripped the cart handle a little too tight. Oh, still here? She said sweetly. They must really be running short on good janitors these days. Mel didn't flinch. She just smiled back. Yeah. And from the smell of this galley, they'll need more soon. Vanessa's smile flickered for a split second, like a glitch in her programming. Then she leaned in, her voice a sharp whisper. This isn't your playground, sweetie. Go back to mopping floors. Mel stepped closer, inches from her face. I know what you're about to do, she said quietly. And if you touch that man in 3B, I'll take you down so hard they'll need a mop to scrape you off the seatbelt sign. Vanessa's expression didn't change, but her eyes flared. And then, without breaking eye contact, she tilted her head toward the cabin and said, loud enough for everyone in earshot to hear, Excuse me, passenger, you're not authorized to be in the galley. Please return to your seat. Mel blinked. Passenger? That's when she saw it. Behind her, a flight attendant, new, young, nervous, was holding a clipboard and mouthing something silently. Her name was on the manifest. Vanessa had swapped her ID at check-in. She wasn't logged as crew anymore. She was logged as a passenger. Which meant Mel was the one technically breaching protocol. Was a trap. The moment she opened her mouth again, she'd be the one accused of impersonating crew. Of interfering with in-flight operations. And if Vanessa had filed the right complaint on her tablet before departure, which she definitely had, then Mel would be the one flagged as a threat. Game. Set. Match. Unless. Mel stepped back, nodded politely and said, My apologies. She turned and walked away slowly, her mind racing. She had no weapons. No official status. And now, no backup. But she did have one thing Vanessa didn't count on. Her memory. Back in the storage closet, Mel had memorized the seat map. Not just passengers but connections. Who boarded with who changed flights last minute, who had special dietary requests. And in 3A right next to Julian Varma? A woman who wasn't on the original list. Mid-40s. Sharp blazer. Expensive watch. No carry-on. She had been added minutes before takeoff. Mel walked down the aisle, slowly watching her. The woman didn't read. Didn't eat. She just sat with perfect posture, hands folded on her lap, and occasionally glanced at Julian like she was studying a specimen. Another hitman? Possibly. But Mel had a hunch. She waited until the seatbelt light went off, then stood slowly and made her move. She leaned across 3A casually and smiled at Julian. Excuse me, she said, I think the attendant gave you the wrong napkin. He blinked. What? Mel gently reached into the seat back pocket in front of him and pulled out the refreshing towel Vanessa had left there earlier. The seal had been broken, barely but enough. She held it up to the light. There, tiny puncture on the seam. Chemical tampering. She turned to the woman in 3A and said, Funny thing about toxins, they don't always smell. But they always leave traces. The woman's hand moved to her hip. Too quick. Too trained. Mel grabbed her wrist midair and twisted. Just hard enough to reveal the small injector concealed beneath the sleeve of her jacket. Ma'am, Mel said calmly, You're under civilian arrest until we land." The woman didn't fight. She just sighed like a chess player realizing she was one move from checkmate. Julian stared dumbfounded. "What the hell is going on?" Mel looked at him, her voice ice cold. "You were about to have a heart attack. Courtesy of your own bodyguard." Gasp. A scream. The other passengers started whispering. One called for the pilot. Vanessa emerged from the galley, her face pale for the first time. "You," she snapped. "You have no authority." But she stopped short. Because two passengers had stood up. Middle-aged. Civilian clothes. But both flashed Department of Homeland Security credentials before anyone could blink. They'd been on board the entire time. Undercover. Watching both of them. Mel exhaled slowly, finally letting herself feel the adrenaline. One agent turned to her and nodded. "Nice work, Cross," he said quietly. "We were hoping you'd show." You ever think you know who someone is, only to realize they've been playing a role so convincingly that even you believed it? That's the thing with people like Vanessa. They don't just hide, they become. They build entire identities like houses of cards and dare the wind to try knocking them down. And when the wind comes, they just rebuild in silence. So when Vanessa saw the two DHS agents flash their badges, she didn't scream, didn't run, didn't panic. She smiled. "I knew it," she murmured, her voice soft as velvet. "I told them it was only a matter of time before the old dog came sniffing." She turned and looked straight at Mel. "I was hoping they'd send you." Mel's jaw clenched. "You don't get to use my name." The entire aircraft cabin had gone dead quiet. Passengers were craning their necks, phones out, whispering, confused but captivated. To them, it probably looked like a scene from a movie, secret agents, a takedown midair, poison packets and all. But Mel wasn't acting. This was personal. Vanessa, if that was even her name, tilted her head. "Still carrying that guilt, huh?" she said. "Still blaming yourself for Ukraine? I told them you wouldn't let it go. That you chase ghosts. Just like always." The agent beside Mel took a step forward. "Ms. Jordan, please remain where you are. Hands where we can see them." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Oh please, Jordan? That's adorable." She reached slowly into her blazer, too slowly for it to be a threat, and pulled out a laminated ID card. She held it up between two fingers and waved it like a white flag. Name, Elena Dmitrieva. Nationality, unknown. Citizenship, classified. Alias, multiple. Mel stared at it, blood draining from her face. The name Elena Dmitrieva had haunted her for years. The woman responsible for 3 high-profile assassinations. A black market broker of false identities, biometric spoofs, and neuroweapons. A ghost who vanished after the Odessa incident. She wasn't just dangerous. She was one of the most wanted non-military operatives in the world. Vanessa, Elena, smirked. "Took you long enough," she said. Before Mel could speak, one of the undercover DHS agents pulled out a set of magnetic restraints and moved to cuff her. That's when everything exploded. Not literally. But chaos erupted like someone had pulled the fire alarm on reality. A heavy jolt shook the aircraft. Not turbulence, something intentional. A systems breach. The cabin lights flickered. A low, mechanical tone rang through the speakers, not the usual seatbelt chime. It was deep, alien, and terrifying. "Attention crew," came the pilot's voice, strained and confused. "We're experiencing a navigation disruption. Autopilot is responding erratically. Please stand by." Mel's eyes snapped to her tablet. The diagnostic system she'd rigged into the aircraft wiring flashed an alert. Unauthorized remote access detected. Source, internal. She turned just in time to see Elena calmly drop a small, thumb-sized device into her drink cup, already fizzing, dissolving into nothing. A self-deleting command node. She hijacked the avionics, Mel said out loud, heart pounding. She was never going to kill Julian. She was going to crash the plane. Elena's smile twisted. Funny how everyone underestimates a stewardess. The two agents lunged for her, but she was ready. She yanked a metal serving tray from the cart and smashed it sideways into the closer one's face. He staggered. Blood sprayed. The other reached for his weapon, but Elena ducked low, spun, and swept his legs with the grace of a dancer trained in 20 kinds of violence. The cabin erupted in screams. Mel surged forward, crashing through rows of seats, grabbing a stray seatbelt and looping it like a lasso. She didn't hesitate. She'd fought in deserts, snowfields, rooftops in Berlin. She knew how this dance worked. She wrapped the belt around Elena's arm mid-swing, yanked hard, and both of them went crashing into the side galley wall. Food trays spilled. Glass shattered. But Mel didn't stop. She twisted, flipped Elena onto her back and slammed her wrist into the cart, trying to snap the nerve endings enough to disable her fingers. But Elena was fast. She headbutt Mel, rolled sideways and went for the emergency hatch lever. "Don't!" Mel yelled, blood running down her cheek. Elena stopped, barely an inch from the handle. She panted, looked around. Her hair disheveled, blood on her lip. And then, in the kind of voice that haunts you forever, she said, "Do you really think this ends here?" Mel held her ground. "You're not getting out of this." Elena glanced at the cabin. Every passenger watching. Every phone camera raised. She looked bored. "I already got what I wanted," she said cryptically. "You just don't know it yet." And then she smiled, that smile, and calmly raised both hands. The agents took her down hard. Mel dropped to her knees, breath ragged as the pilot's voice came back overhead. "We've regained control. Someone tampered with the communication system. We're making an emergency descent into Chicago O'Hare." Applause broke out across the cabin. Mel didn't move, because she knew something was off. Elena Dmitrieva had wanted to be caught. She could have vanished mid-flight, crashed a plane, poisoned Julian. But she hadn't, which meant this wasn't the end of the mission. It was the beginning. You'd think landing a plane after almost being hijacked midair would feel like a victory. You'd think the passengers would disembark, shake hands with the pilot, maybe thank the brave janitor who turned out to be a covert agent. But nah, real life isn't like the movies. In real life, when you land in Chicago O'Hare under emergency federal detainment protocols, you're met with a security wall of black SUVs, flashing red and blue lights, and men in tactical gear whose faces are so blank it's like they were carved from stone. Mel didn't even get to step off the plane on her own. The moment the wheels hit the tarmac, DHS agents stormed the cabin in silence. No announcements. No shouting. Just clean, practiced movement. They took Elena, still smug, still smiling, into custody. They collected the two undercover agents who'd taken hits from her, one of whom now had a broken nose and a concussion. And then, without saying a word, they gestured for Mel to follow. Which she did. Through the service exit. Down the stairs. Across the tarmac. Into the belly of a cold, concrete hangar with no airline logos and no windows. And that's where the debrief started. If you've never sat in a federal debriefing room, let me paint it for you. Plain table, 2 chairs, flickering fluorescent light above you. One mirrored window that everyone pretends isn't a mirror. The air smells like stale coffee and old sweat. You don't sit there as a hero. You sit there as a variable. Which is exactly what Mel had become. Not trusted. Not fully rogue. Just inconvenient. The door opened after 30 minutes of silence, and in walked Commander Saul Richmond, the one man Mel hoped she'd never see again. Tall, gray-bearded, with the posture of a man who's always 2 steps away from yelling at someone. He wore his DHS insignia like a threat. When he sat down, he didn't even look at her. He just tossed a file onto the table. "You weren't cleared to be on that flight," he said. Mel met his eyes. "I saved it." He didn't blink. "You also compromised a multi-agency surveillance operation. That flight was bait, Cross. Elena Dmitrieva was never supposed to be captured. We were tracking who she met in New York." Mel froze. "You're telling me you let her board?" "We were monitoring her network. Tracking the bigger fish. She hijacked the avionics. We had that covered." Mel laughed bitterly. "Oh yeah? You had it so covered she nearly flew 180 passengers into Lake Michigan." Richmond sighed and opened the file. "You were never supposed to re-engage. You went dark 3 years ago. You burned your own record, remember? Now I've got 20 senators calling me because some rogue agent tackled a fake flight attendant in front of 50 cell phone cameras." Mel leaned forward. "She poisoned a billionaire. She rigged the aircraft to crash. And she knew my name, Saul." That made him pause. "She said she knew I'd come." He shut the file. "Because she did. You didn't stop her, Cross. You played your part perfectly. She wanted to be caught." Mel stared, heart thudding. "No one caught her. She delivered herself." Richmond nodded grimly. "And now she's exactly where she wants to be. They were keeping her in a high-security facility downtown. Level 7 clearance, biometric locks, constant surveillance. Elena hadn't said a word since being processed. No lawyer requests. No demands. Just silence. Too much silence. "Take me to her," Mel said. "You're not active." "I'm not asking for permission." Richmond rubbed his temple. "You always were a pain in my ass." But he made the call. That night, under escort, Mel entered a holding cell unlike any she'd seen. It looked more like a sci-fi set than a prison room. Elena sat at the center of it, hands cuffed to the table, posture perfect, face unreadable. When she saw Mel walk in, she finally moved, just a slow, approving nod. I wondered how long it would take. Mel didn't sit. What? Why give yourself up? Elena smiled faintly. Because some prisons are easier to break into than out of. Mel frowned. You want something here? I already got it. Then what's the game? Elena leaned forward, chains rattling just a little. You still don't get it, she whispered. Julian Varma? Wasn't the target. The flight? Just noise. A spark. A spark for what? Elena's smile widened. For the firestorm. Mel's pulse quickened. What firestorm? Elena looked past her, straight at the security camera. You ever wonder what happens when you erase someone from every system in the world? Not just their passport. Their existence. Mel froze. Julian's AI, she said slowly. You wanted it. Elena nodded. Too risky to steal. Too many eyes. But if you tricked the world into thinking you tried to kill the creator? While your people clone and deploy his software on the outside. Then by the time anyone realizes what's happening. It's too late, Mel finished, her voice hollow. Pause. Then. Mel, Elena said, using her real name with deliberate weight. I didn't come to end things. I came to begin something. And then, slowly from beneath her sleeve, she peeled back her cuff just enough to reveal a blinking microchip embedded under the skin. It pulsed red. Mel took a step back. Elena, what is that? Elena smiled one final time. And whispered. The key. The prison lights flickered once. Just a blink. The kind of thing you wouldn't even notice unless you were looking for it. But Mel noticed. She'd seen that flicker before. In bunkers halfway across the world, right before encrypted systems dropped offline like dominoes. Elena, Mel said, her voice low, what did you do? The red light embedded under Elena's skin blinked again. Faster this time. Mel's hand went instinctively to her belt, where her emergency communicator used to be, back when she was official. Now, she had nothing but instinct and adrenaline. I told you, Elena said calmly. You thought this was the story. You thought the plane, the billionaire, the takedown, that was the climax. The lights flickered again. Then went out. Boom. The entire detention center dropped into darkness like someone had ripped the cord from the wall. Emergency backup lights clicked on a second later, casting everything in pulsing red strobes. The walls buzzed with electric unease. Sirens blared from somewhere deep in the compound. Mel spun toward the door, locked. Thick steel. Electronically sealed. Elena, she snapped. This isn't going to end the way you think. Elena tilted her head, the flickering red light dancing across her cheekbones like a villain in a final act reveal. I know how it ends, she whispered. That's the difference between you and me. You're still hoping it's not real. On the far wall, the mirrored window cracked, from the inside. A figure emerged from the darkness behind it, dressed in a full black tactical suit, face hidden behind a visor. Mel barely had time to react. The figure tossed something. Smoke grenade. The room filled with thick, choking white fog in seconds. Visibility dropped to 0. Mel dove low, rolling beneath the interrogation table, heart hammering. She reached up and yanked Elena's ankle hard. Pulled her out of her chair just as the mystery intruder lunged through the fog, slashing where her throat had been seconds ago. Elena gasped, not in fear. In surprise. You're protecting me? She choked, still coughing on smoke. I don't let anyone die, Mel growled. Not even monsters. With her free hand, Mel grabbed the broken chair leg from the floor and swung it blindly into the attacker's ribs. A sharp crack and a grunt of pain. She grabbed Elena by the collar and shoved her toward the corner of the room. Stay down. Elena obeyed for once. Mel lunged at the shadowy figure. They grappled hard, twisting, trading blows in the haze. This wasn't some average goon. This one knew her moves. Anticipated her footwork. Countered every strike. Which meant, who sent you? Mel snarled. The figure didn't answer. Just headbutt her, sending her sprawling into the wall. Her vision blurred, stars bursting across her sightline. A moment later, the intruder grabbed Elena, pulling her toward the shattered mirror. Elena. Mel croaked. You said you wanted to be in here. Why run now? Elena hesitated. Just for a second. And that second was enough. Mel surged forward, tackled the attacker into the mirror frame, slamming him headfirst into the reinforced edge. His helmet cracked. Glass rained down. Mel ripped the visor off. And froze. Underneath the tactical mask was a face she recognized. Agent Davis. Digit. Her former handler. The man who'd signed her decommission papers. Davis, she whispered. You're working for her? He glared at her, blood trickling from his brow. You don't get it, Mel? The system's broken. She's not the enemy anymore. She's the upgrade. And with that, he yanked a hidden pin from his belt. Mini EMP. He slammed it into the floor. The room exploded in white light. When Mel woke, she was handcuffed to a hospital bed. The walls were beige. The hum of machines pulsed in rhythm with her heart. Her mouth was dry. Her knuckles were scraped raw. Commander Richmond sat in the corner. You're lucky, he said without looking up. 2 more minutes and they'd have gotten away with her. Mel blinked. Where is she? Safe. For now. Transfer secured. Maximum isolation cell. Mel shook her head. There's no such thing with her. You think she wanted to escape? She didn't? He did. Richmond finally looked at her. Davis? Mel nodded. He's not rogue. He's converted. Richmond stood up, crossed the room slowly and shut the door with a soft click. Then he turned back to her, his voice suddenly lower. There's more, he said. We searched Elena's skin. That blinking chip under her wrist? It wasn't just a key. Mel's stomach turned. Then what was it? Richmond pulled a phone from his pocket, tapped the screen and turned it toward her. A video played. A data stream. Lines of code flying faster than the eye could track. Biometrics. Flight logs. Military satellites. Names. And then, at the very bottom of the screen, blinking in red letters. Phase 1 complete. Operation Ghostwalk activated. Mel felt the blood drain from her body. Ghostwalk. It wasn't a plan. It was a protocol. One that she had only heard whispered during her active years. A master algorithm that could overwrite entire government systems from inside. Untraceable, irreversible. A total reboot of the intelligence world. Richmond's face was grim. Elena didn't want Julian dead. She already had his code. The crash threat? The poison? Just smoke and mirrors. Ghostwalk was already deployed. The plane wasn't her target. Mel finished the thought for him. It was her alibi. And now, she was safely locked away in a government facility that, thanks to her own implanted malware, had no idea that the woman sitting in cell 17 was controlling the system from the inside. Mel used to believe there was a line. A clear one. Between the good guys and the bad guys. Between justice and chaos. Between law and whatever Elena Dmitrieva had unleashed into the world. But that belief shattered the moment she saw her own name flash across the red-lettered log of targeted identities, Phase 2. Melanie Cross, status. Reassignment pending. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was on the list. The hospital bed was gone now. She discharged herself 3 hours after regaining consciousness, against Richmond's orders. Her knuckles were still raw. Her head throbbed with every heartbeat. But she didn't care. She didn't have time to rest. Because if Elena had already triggered Operation Ghostwalk, then identities, real ones, official ones, were being rewritten as they spoke. Whole lives wiped clean. Others, overwritten with false flags. And Mel? She was one of the first casualties. She saw it when she tried to access her secure Dropbox account. Invalid credentials. Tried her retinal scan at the field office in downtown Chicago. Unrecognized biometric. Tried to call in a favor from a former contact in Langley. Who is this? The voice on the line had asked. There's no one by that name in our system. She didn't just not exist anymore. She had never existed. Mel knew it wasn't just a digital trick. This was the full power of Ghostwalk. Not just identity theft. Identity rewriting. Elena hadn't just taken the tools Julian Varma created. She had perfected them. Turned them loose like hunting dogs. And now, they were sniffing out anyone who ever stood in her way. Mel grabbed the burner phone she'd acquired from a guy under a bridge who didn't ask questions and only accepted cash. She texted one word to the only number she still remembered by heart. Grayline. 10 minutes later she got a ping back. Warehouse District. Unit 34. Bring nothing. She stuffed the phone in her boot and started moving. The warehouse district in Chicago is the kind of place city maps forget. Half of it's gentrified into overpriced lofts. The other half is abandoned, rotting, slowly collapsing under decades of secrets. Unit 34 was in the collapsing half. It looked empty, which meant it wasn't. She stepped inside and immediately heard the click of a safety being disengaged. Hands where I can see them. She obeyed. Slowly. Deliberately. A man stepped out from the shadows. Tall. Mixed race. Sharp features. A scar down his left cheek. Eyes like stone. Gray line, she said, smirking. Still dramatic. He lowered the weapon just slightly. Still reckless, I see. You got my text. Hard to miss. You used the old code. Nobody uses the old code anymore. I needed to know if anyone was still real. He eyed her for a beat, then gave a single nod and gestured her inside. Inside the warehouse was a makeshift bunker. Cots, tech gear, paper files, analog comms. Nothing digital. Nothing hackable. That's how Grayline lived. That's how he'd survived this long. Mel dropped into a chair. Elena's alive, she said. And she's already launched Ghostwalk. I figured. 3 of my contacts disappeared yesterday. Not vanished. Like, erased. Their fingerprints didn't scan. One of them tried to buy a train ticket. Got flagged as a dead man. She's faster than we thought. Grayline pulled out a file. Flipped it open. You're not just a target, he said. You're a template. Mel blinked. What does that mean? She's using your profile, your behavioral history, mission records, psych evals, to build a deepfake personality matrix. She's replicating you. Selling versions of you to foreign states. You've been cloned. Mel stared at the file. There, printed in grainy black and white, were images of her. Not her, exactly. But close. Other women. Same height. Same eyes. Same posture. Trained to move like her. Speak like her. Be her. Why me? She whispered. Grayline looked up. Because you beat her once, he said. And because she needs you to rewrite the rest of the system. Mel froze. You're the original biometric anchor, he explained. Your DNA, your profile, it's embedded in every firewall we built post-Ukraine. Elena can't finish rewriting the US defense grid without your code. You're the master key. Mel's breath caught in her throat. So this whole thing, the plane, Julian, the takedown? It was to get you back into the system, Grayline said. To activate the trace. Now that you're flagged and re-engaged, she can track your moves, predict your choices, until she finds the final encryption string. Mel stood up, the chair screeching back behind her. I have to go underground. You are underground. No, she said. I need to disappear. Not just digitally. I need to erase myself physically. Stop being predictable. Grayline raised an eyebrow. That's not just going off-grid. That's off-life. She nodded. I know. Pause. Then he pulled a duffel bag from under the desk and slid it across the table. Inside, burner passports, cash, forged IDs, clothes. A new identity. Or maybe, the last real one she'd ever have. You'll need to leave tonight, he said. There's only one person left who knows how to bypass the biometric loop and kill Ghostwalk permanently. Mel looked up. Who? Grayline handed her a photo. A young woman. Asian American. Sharp eyes. Tattoos on her fingers. Hacker. Bioforensics expert. Codename Fable. She went dark 2 years ago, Grayline said. Word is she's hiding somewhere in Morocco. You find her, you find the kill switch. Mel pocketed the photo. And just before she stepped out the warehouse door, Grayline said one last thing. Cross. She turned. If they're cloning you, that means they're sending you after yourself. Mel stared. And then whispered, let them try. Tangier is a city that breathes in secrets and exhales smoke. It's a place where past and present blur like heat waves, where you can vanish among a million footsteps if you know how to move. And Mel Cross, whatever name she was using now, moved like a woman who knew how to disappear. She'd been in Morocco for 3 days. No phones. No cards. Just burner cash and her instincts. But instincts don't help much when your ghost is chasing you. The lead Grayline gave her wasn't solid. Fable hadn't been seen in public in almost 2 years. But according to Grayline's contacts, someone matching her description had shown up in Tangier's Medina 3 weeks ago. Passing through spice markets, bartering tech parts for crypto flash drives, always moving at night, always hooded. Mel started there. The market was a labyrinth of color and noise, pulsing with life, vendors shouting in 4 languages, old radios hissing half-tuned songs, the smell of mint tea and hot oil lingering in the air like perfume. She moved slow, blending in, scanning faces. Looking for eyes that didn't belong. Then she saw it. Not Fable. Herself. Standing 30 feet away across a stretch of alley, near a cracked stucco wall covered in faded graffiti. Same height. Same build. Same hairstyle pulled tight and functional. The woman wore a dark hoodie, mirrored sunglasses, and held herself like someone who'd seen too much and still kept going. But it was the gait, the walk, that gave it away. It was her walk. Mel froze, heart hammering. The clone didn't. She turned her head just slightly, then vanished around a corner like a ripple in reality. Mel surged forward, weaving through people, ignoring shouted curses and knocked over baskets of dates. She hit the alley at full sprint, boot soles slapping sun-baked concrete. Gone. The alley was empty. But a piece of cardboard flapped in the wind where the clone had stood. On it, scrawled in red sharp, "Stop looking. Start listening." Mel's breath caught. She spun, checking rooftops, windows. Nothing. Then a voice echoed from a nearby speaker, tinny, distorted, buried in static. "You're not hunting Elena. You're walking the path she built for you." The voice wasn't hers. It wasn't Elena's either. It was Fable. Mel's eyes locked on a tiny security camera nestled in the corner of the wall. Dead. Fried. The feed had been pre-recorded. Triggered by facial recognition. "Melanie Cross," the voice continued, cool and clinical. "Biometric anchor. Military grade. Version 1.0. Your code is already in motion. I can stop it, but not if you keep chasing shadows." Mel stepped closer to the camera. "Then show yourself," she whispered. Static. Then silence. And then, one word. Midnight. A location pinged to the burner phone in her pocket. She hadn't even realized it had turned on. She pulled it out. No number. Just GPS coordinates. An old bathhouse near the coast. Midnight. The bathhouse was abandoned. Cracked tiles. Broken lanterns. A copper fountain that hadn't run in decades. Moonlight filtered in through a shattered skylight, turning the steamless air into something ghostly. Mel entered slowly, silently. She didn't need to wait long. From behind a torn curtain stepped a woman, young, lean, wrapped in a shawl stitched with old code. Lines of binary flowed like embroidery across the hem. "Fable. You found me," she said. Her voice was lower than Mel expected. Grounded. "You left me the coordinates." Fable smiled faintly. "Sure. But you still had to choose to come." Mel folded her arms. "You know who I am. I know what you are." There was silence. Long, heavy. Then Mel said, "You have the kill switch?" Fable nodded. "It's not a button. It's a choice. You don't shut down Ghostwalk with code. You shut it down with erasure." "Explain." Fable walked to the old fountain, placed a silver case on its rim, flipped it open. Inside was a compact cube the size of a Rubik's Cube, coated in matte black polymer, pulsing with soft blue light. "This," Fable said, "is a recursive identity bomb. You deploy it inside a protected node, like a federal server, a live biometric scanner, a military access hub. It doesn't delete Ghostwalk. It infects it, corrupts the logic tree until it loops back on itself. Ghostwalk collapses under the weight of its own lies." Mel approached. "What's the cost?" Fable looked up, eyes solemn. "Your identity. For real this time. You use this and you don't exist anymore. Not digitally. Not biologically. No DNA match. No face scan. No voice record. You become untraceable. Untouchable." Mel stared at the cube. "You want me to die. I want Elena to lose. You're just collateral." A beat of silence passed. Then Fable stepped back. "You have a clone chasing you. Probably more than one. If Elena realizes you have this cube before you deploy it, she'll unleash them all. And they'll know you better than you know yourself." Mel looked up. "Then I'll have to become unpredictable." She reached for the cube. Fable didn't stop her. "You'll need help getting it into a secure node," she said. "There's only one left that's fully isolated, off-grid. Military server hub in Norway. Deep in the Arctic vault." Mel blinked. "That's not just off-grid. That's suicidal." Fable smirked. "Exactly. That's why they'll never expect it." Mel took the cube, slid it into the lining of her jacket. And just before she turned to leave, Fable said one last thing. "They're going to send the clone after you. The closest one. The prototype. Gen 0. Mel paused. "How will I know it's her?" Fable tilted her head. "You won't." And then the lights in the bathhouse went out. When Mel turned back, Fable was gone. Only the fountain remained and the sound of her own breathing, loud, real, alive. There are places so cold, so remote, that even time seems to forget them. The Arctic vault in Norway was one of them. A military-grade data center buried under permafrost and reinforced rock, originally built to survive a nuclear winter. Ironically, it now held the last fragment of uncorrupted identity infrastructure on Earth, a place so disconnected, it had become priceless. And that's where Mel was headed. She traveled under 5 aliases through 3 countries, avoiding cameras, checkpoints, and digital footprints like landmines. Every move calculated. Every step buried in silence. But she still felt eyes on her. Somewhere between Oslo and the northernmost access point, she found herself waking up from shallow sleep on a chartered snowcat, drenched in sweat, dreams maybe or memories, but one thing was certain. She wasn't alone out here. The Arctic sky hung heavy as slate. Mel stepped out of the transport vehicle with her boots crunching on snow that hadn't been touched in weeks. Before her, the vault entrance loomed, a massive steel cylinder embedded in the mountain like a bolt in the Earth's skull. 2 guards greeted her. Neither spoke. They scanned the ID chip embedded in the base of her new thumb, thanks to Fable's tech. It pinged green. Authorized, systems admin access, 1XUs. Inside the tunnel, lights flickered on one by one as she walked, casting her shadow along concrete walls that smelled like ozone and history. The cube in her pocket was pulsing now, faster. Like it could sense how close it was to the node it needed. It was time. She reached the inner chamber, a circular room lit by soft blue panels. At the center stood the node. An obelisk of smooth black metal, humming gently like a beast breathing in its sleep. Surrounding it were ancient consoles, command lines scrolling with idle code. She reached into her jacket, pulled out the cube, and froze. A figure was standing behind her. Reflection only in the smooth paneling. Same height. Same stance. Same scar above the eyebrow. She turned around slowly. There she was. Gen Zero. The clone. But this wasn't just a biological copy. This was an echo, an engineered predator built from everything Mel had ever been, poured into an enhanced, emotionally stripped-down frame. Dressed in tactical thermal wear, goggles pushed up, hands bare. No hesitation. They locked eyes. "You're not going to win," Mel said softly. The clone tilted her head. "I'm not here to win. I'm here to complete the cycle." They moved at the same time. No words. No monologue. Just violence. They crashed into each other like opposing forces of nature, fists flying, knees driving. Every move Mel threw was met with a mirrored counter. Blocks, reversals, redirections. It was like fighting her reflection, only stronger. Smarter. Slightly faster. But Mel had something the clone didn't. Pain. And pain? Makes you desperate. Makes you creative. She faked a stumble, drew the clone into a forward lunge, then twisted her ankle just enough to drop her own weight, and snap. Drove her elbow into the clone's collarbone. The sound cracked through the air. The clone gasped. Real breath. Mel rolled, scrambled for the cube and lunged toward the node. But the clone tackled her, slammed her face first into the cold floor. The cube skidded across the room. They fought again, this time bloodier. More brutal. Both women slipping in their own red footprints, breathing like dying animals. Mel's vision blurred. The clone's mouth was bleeding now. Something in her ribs cracked. "Why me?" Mel rasped. "Why clone me?" The clone hesitated for a split second. And whispered, "Because you're the only one Elena ever feared." Mel's fingers found a broken shard of the metal housing. She jammed it upward into the clone's thigh. Scream. Collapse. The clone dropped like a cut wire. Mel dragged herself across the floor, reached the cube and pulled it toward the node. Her hands were trembling. Blood soaked through her gloves. The cube clicked into place at the base of the obelisk. A hum. A flash of white light. And then, the screens went wild. Lines of code tore across the walls. Names. IDs. Biometrics. But they weren't erasing, they were looping. Caught in recursive conflict. The virus was working. Ghostwalk was eating itself. Alarms began to blare deep in the system. Backup servers tried to resist. AI defenses kicked in. But it was too late. The cube's signal was spreading like a cancer. Mel dropped to her knees. She didn't feel victorious. She felt hollow. The clone lay a few feet away, breathing hard. Mel crawled to her, stared into her identical eyes. "You feel pain," Mel whispered. "You bleed. You can choose." The clone's jaw clenched. Then choose not to be her. And for the first time since appearing, the clone didn't attack. Didn't move. She just looked away. And said nothing. Outside the vault, the storm had begun. News reports, smuggled through analog radio and satellite feeds, were already coming in. Global AI disruption reported. Several government agencies experiencing system loops and digital identity malfunctions. Initial theories suggest internal sabotage. Homeland Intelligence denies involvement. Mel walked out into the white, wind slicing across her face. She was nobody now. No records. No name. No citizenship. A ghost. But Elena had lost control. Ghostwalk was broken. And in the distance, on the cliff above the frozen shoreline, a figure stood in silence. Not the clone. Elena. Wrapped in a black coat, hands clasped behind her back, watching the world unravel in real time. She looked down at Mel with something that almost resembled admiration, then turned and disappeared over the ridge. Mel always thought the end would be loud. Explosions. Sirens. Screams. But instead it came with silence. Cold, sharp, and absolute. She stood at the edge of the Arctic ridge, wind clawing at her coat, breath condensing in thin white clouds. Behind her, the data vault still pulsed with emergency lights as Ghostwalk devoured itself in endless recursion. Below her, the frozen sea stretched to the horizon, indifferent to everything unraveling above it. And ahead, nothing. No sign of Elena. No trace of the clone. Just her, and the weight of what she'd done. She had no name now. No home. No records. No family she could contact without risking them. Ghostwalk hadn't just burned the digital map. It had erased her from the terrain entirely. She was gone. And yet she was still here. Alive. Free. But that freedom came with a cost. She had no proof she ever existed. No proof that the most dangerous digital weapon in history had been shut down because of her. The world wouldn't celebrate her. Wouldn't mourn her. Wouldn't know. And that, she realized, was the only way it could end. Because sometimes saving the world meant becoming a ghost in it. Mel's first steps back into civilization were through cracked snow and stolen time. She crossed into Sweden using the backup ID Greyline had slipped into her jacket. A birth certificate for a woman named Clara Nystrom, born in 1991, deceased in a boating accident at age 12. The new ID read alive. She used that name to board a mail ferry bound for the coast. No passport checks. Just a nod from the captain who didn't ask questions. People who live on the edge of the world rarely do. She sat in silence as the icy waters slid past the hull, listening to the wind howl and the wood creak. And that's when the voice returned. Faint. Familiar. You're not done. She looked around. No one near her. Just the waves. But the voice wasn't out there. It was in her. A message Fable had buried in the cube, maybe. A final transmission. Or perhaps something more. Because the war might be over, but the weapon Elena built had echoes. Fragments. Residual data leaching into black market hands. Just because you unplug the machine doesn't mean its shadow disappears. Mel knew that. And Fable knew it too. 2 weeks later, Mel sat in a cafe in Lisbon. She watched as tourists ordered drinks they couldn't pronounce and laughed in languages they barely understood. A man played a soft guitar under the awning. The world had moved on. Already forgotten the identity anomalies. Already patched the bugs. She was sipping tea when a girl with buzzed hair and finger tattoos walked past her table. Didn't stop. Didn't speak. Just slid a napkin across her table as she walked by. Mel waited. Then opened it. Ghostwalk under 2.0 dash target, undisclosed. Dashed status, reconstruction initiated. Dash code requires primary DNA seed. Mel stared. Her tea went cold. Because there was only one DNA seed left on Earth that could bring Ghostwalk back. Hers. 3 days later, she found herself on a rooftop in Berlin, the city she once almost died in. Greyline met her there, older, wearier, but still sharp. He didn't ask for proof. He didn't need to. They're rebuilding it? He asked. Someone is, Mel replied. Government. She shook her head. Worse. Private. He sighed. Elena? No, she said. Elena's gone. He looked at her. Then said it softly, Clone? Mel didn't answer. Because the truth was, she didn't know. Later that night, she stood in front of a broken mirror in a train station bathroom. Flickering lights. Scratched tiles. The kind of place ghosts pass through without being seen. She looked at her reflection. It looked back. Same eyes. Same scar. Same face. But she didn't feel like Mel anymore. Not really. Not Clara either. Not even the ghost of who she'd once been. She reached into her coat pocket. Pulled out a silver flash drive. Stamped with one word. Remains. She didn't plug it in. Not yet. Because sometimes the story doesn't end with the final fight. Sometimes it ends with a choice. To keep running. To turn around. Or to become something else entirely. She looked into her reflection one last time. Then smiled. Not because it was over. But because she wasn't. Not yet.